Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining Fortress Power webinar with special guest Sol Ark. Our presenters today include Alex Lepore from Fortress Power and Andy Goldstein from Sol Ark. We also have technical support joining us, Dustin Douglas from Sol Ark and Eric Wang from Fortress Power. We will have a Q&A session at the end of the webinar, so if you have any questions throughout, please ask them at the questions tab, and we will try to get to all of your questions at the end. Also, a copy of this presentation will be sent to all attendees, so you don't have to worry about taking notes. And without further ado, please welcome Alex Lepore.
Jamie, thank you for the introduction. Everybody, thank you for joining us here on this webinar with the Sol Ark team. I also want to thank Sol Ark for being our special guest here today for this informative webinar. So without further ado, let's get this going. So today I'm going to talk about a few different things on the Fortress side. I'll do a quick Fortress Power introduction, a background of who we are and what we do. I'll then go over the battery technology comparison in terms of the different battery chemistries on the market. I'll do a quick product introduction on the different models of storages that we have and how they can be fitted for these different applications that we see. And then at the end, I'm going to pass it on over to the Sol Ark team. They have some pretty cool demos they're going to be displaying during this webinar as well. So without further ado, the introduction of Fortress Power. So we are a lithium battery provider based outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in Southampton. It's about 25-30 minutes north of the city. And we focus on primarily residential and commercial battery backup options. So you can see here on the right, this is our facility. It's a 30,000 square foot facility where we do a lot of the R&D, sales, and logistics for our different customers. We also have logistics centers in California and Florida. We have over 70 megawatt hours of installations of batteries worldwide, ranging from Latin America, Canada, the continental US, and even dabbling a little bit in Africa. And we've certainly seen a big, not only growth in interest of energy storage, but because of these different applications and different ways batteries can be used, a lot more interest in batteries being used to help people. We are also the exclusive battery supplier for a few railway companies and utility companies for the railways for their train tracks and different utility projects on the commercial side. We do work with a few different financing partners for those interested in financing. So to name a few, we're working with LoanPal, Sunlight Financial, Enerbank USA, and Lightstream. And there will be more to follow as there are plenty of financing partners out there. So we will be able to update this list periodically. So that's it on Fortress Power. We are based out of Philadelphia and we focus on lithium iron phosphate chemistry in our battery units. So as everybody I'm sure is aware of, battery technology is rapidly changing. From the phones that we have on our everyday lives to the old Nokias or Motorola's, the battery technology, whether it's a lead acid battery, a lithium iron battery, or a nickel cobalt or a nickel iron battery, excuse me, there's a lot of questions regarding what battery chemistry do I use? What's going to work with my application? How can I use it? And when can I use it? So I guess the main question here is why lithium iron technology? Why did Fortress Power focus on this technology when there are, many other options out there? Well, the first thing, oh, sorry, guys, little technical difficulties. There we go. So the first thing on why we chose to go with lithium is because of the long lifespan of it. So as I'm sure you know, the lithium iron phosphate has a very high cycle life, and you'll see that over 90% of the global new energy storage installations are paired with lithium. They have a very low energy cost because of the long life cycle, so the cost per kilowatt hours. They have a 98% round trip efficiency. Oops. They are very compact and light. There is no ventilation needed. There is no maintenance with lithium iron chemistry, and they are able to be discharged to 100%. They have the ability to be fast charged and discharged, and they do have a very consistent discharge power. So typically I'll talk more about where maybe one chemistry makes more sense for home energy storage and one makes sense for the automotive sector. So if we look at how lithium compares with lead acid I think was the staple for many years for home energy storage, but with this entrance of lithium, it's really kind of changed the game. So you can see here on the bottom left, I have this graph of showing your current as it goes up versus the capacity of the battery. So current going up could be for any number of reasons. You're powering loads in the house, you're running something off it like a surge, like an AC unit, there's a surge for that. So it's important to look at, as the current goes up, what's going to happen to the capacity of your battery in terms of, amp hours or kilowatt hours. So you see here with LFP, this green line, as your current goes up, your capacity is going to stay the same. And if you look at, like a flooded lead acid or an AGM or a gel battery, you'll see that as your current increases, the capacity decreases. So what does this mean? It means that if your nameplate of the, let's say, flooded lead acid is, 100 amp hours, as you crank up the current because it's powering an electrical load, you're actually losing capacity. Now, what does this mean? It means that you have to size the lead acid battery just a little bit bigger than the lithium, because you have to account that the capacity will drop as the current increases because they're powering more loads. So typically lead acids only allow for a 50% depth of discharge. So you have to account for the actual capacity being 0.5 multiplied by the nameplate capacity. So if you had, let's say, a 5 kilowatt hour lead acid battery, the actual capacity would be 2.5 kilowatt hours. So lead acid capacity drops significantly when the output current increases. In addition to that, the lithium solution is a third of the size and a third of the weight of an AGM or a lead acid solution. So here you'll see that we have two of our eVault 18.5s with two of the Sol Ark units. This is around, let's say, 30 to 35 kilowatt hours worth of storage. You would need, in comparison to like a lead acid, you would need almost double or even triple this amount in terms of the lead acid capacity. Imagine that you have your lead acid batteries down here, it'd probably go along this whole wall because of all that capacity is needed. So lithium is definitely more energy dense than the lead acid solution. And it's definitely a heck of a lot lighter, since that chemistry allows it to be packed more tightly packed into the battery. So then now I have here how lithium iron compares with the flooded lead acid, AGM, and nickel iron solutions. So I'm not going to go over each one of these individually, but a few things I would like to point out is the first thing is the round trip efficiency. So you can see here lithium iron has a 98% round trip efficiency, while the flooded lead acid has around 80, AGM 88, and nickel iron at 65. If you look at the energy throughput, we're expecting 47 megawatt hours of energy throughput in a lithium iron battery. And energy throughput, in essence, is the total amount of energy a battery can be expected to store and deliver over its lifetime. To calculate for energy throughput, for those that want to calculate it on their own, you can take the nominal capacity, multiply it by the depth of discharge, then by the efficiency, and then by the cycle life. So if you look at the cost of a 10 kilowatt hour lithium iron battery in comparison to these other three options, you'll see it is higher than the flooded lead acid or AGM. But on the other hand, if you look at the cost per kilowatt hour, this is an important number. 14 cents in comparison to 74 cents or 57 cents or even 19 cents. You can tell that because of this chemistry and the affordability of lithium iron, you're going to pay less per kilowatt hour per cycle because of the chemistry in our format of the system. Now, lithium iron, like I mentioned, is very safe, one of the safest, if not the safest chemistry on the market. And there is no maintenance. So unlike a generator or like a flooded lead acid where you're putting water into it, there is no maintenance on batteries. You put it in and then you let it go and it's good to go. And if we look at some of the different outside of lead acids, if we look at different other lithium solutions, let's say like the lithium ion or nickel manganese cobalt, like Tesla LG Chem, or the lithium polymer, this is similar to the battery that is found in your phone. So over here you can see Fortress Power with their LFP chemistry, and we have the safest of the three. These are eco-friendly, as lithium iron phosphate can be recycled, unlike the lithium ion or the lithium polymer, because of this added element of cobalt. It's also much more thermally stable than the Tesla or the Humless because of the chemistry in that, and it has much longer life cycles, 6,000 life cycles and 80% depth of discharge, while the lithium ion cells or lithium ion batteries, they're only going to last around 3,000 cells, maybe 3,500 if you're taking really good care of it. So one thing that you will see, however, is the energy density. So LFP is less energy dense than the NMC or the LiFePO, the lithium polymer chemistry, excuse me. So I always say that NMC, for example, with Tesla, has a great car. It's really good for vehicles that need that high energy density to move the car from point A to point B. Certainly that makes sense. But if you have a stationary application in someone's home where you need that safety, you're really aiming for longevity, something that they can cycle a lot and put power into their loads to keep their home running or what BU, that's where I really see lithium iron phosphate really becoming the most advantageous chemistry to use for those different kinds of applications. And just so everybody knows, I'm gonna take a quick break here. I will be sending out these slides after the fact, so no need to rush and jot down notes and everything. You will have this whole slideshow afterwards. So one thing I always encourage people to do as they debate, okay, why lithium iron? Should I look at lithium cobalt or lithium ion or even a lead acid? I always encourage them to search LFP versus NMC nail test. Essentially what they do in this test is they take a 10 penny inch nail and they drill it right through the center of the cells. So a picture is worth 1,000 words, and you can see here on the left, the LFP cell they drill the nail through. You'll see in the video it does smoke a little bit, to be fair. There's a little bit of smoking. Other than that, nothing too much. And then over here on the right, you look at this same test, but with a nickel manganese cobalt technology or a lithium ion, and you'll see it goes full on apocalyptic when they do that same kind of test. So I found this very helpful when people ask, isn't lithium the same all around? It's truly not. It's really an apples to oranges comparison, even just based on this comparison here with the nail test. So I think overall, when you're comparing these different lithium technologies, I usually look out for 4 things. I look out for the safety of the particular battery, looking for something with high throughput, which is, like I mentioned, the amount of energy a battery can be expected to store and deliver over its lifetime. I look for the duration. How many cycles is this going to get me at what depth of discharge? And I also look at the low energy cost. How much is this going to cost? Dollars per kilowatt hours? And then are there other rebates and incentives that can be added along with that to help the customer? So as I mentioned, we have LFP, ion, and polymer. The round trip efficiency, 98%. If you're looking at the energy throughput here, that important energy throughput in megawatt hours, 47 comparison to 22, I'll round up, for lithium ion and 12 for lithium polymer. So double the amount of energy throughput in a LFP cell versus a lithium ion cell. We're looking at the cost per kilowatt hours, 14 cents in comparison to 30 and 40. And then obviously the safety aspect of it based on my previous slide is really important, especially since these are in homes and garages and basements and in all kinds of places. So very important in terms of where it's going to be installed. So moving on, product introduction, what we do. So the first thing I want to kind of bring up is why we choose to use the cell that we use. There are 3 main cells on the market that you would typically see in batteries. There's a prismatic cell, there's a pouch cell, and there's a cylindrical cell. Cylindrical cell is probably one of the most well-known because it's been around for a little bit. And same with the pouch. The prismatic cell is relatively new. We use the prismatic cells. You can see down here, it's really the way to go for lithium batteries. It's very durable, 3 stars out of 3 stars. It is thermally stable. It has that 6,000 cycles, that nice long life cycle longevity. Very simple to install and vice versa, and it has the fast charging and discharging. Now, as you did notice, the power density of the prismatic cell is a little bit less than the pouch, but I guess at the end of the day, when you do have that thermal stability and the durability and the simplicity, the prismatic cell really speaks for itself when looking at different batteries. Now, granted, to be fair, not one cell fits all the different batteries and applications out there. There could be situations where a cylindrical cell might make more sense or a pouch cell might make more sense. However, we're typically seeing that the prismatic cells are definitely the way to go because of all the beneficial characteristics that they provide in terms of the usage of it and then the maintenance of it. So we use in our products, I'll now go to battery management systems. So before I kind of dive into this, what is a battery management system? Battery management system is essentially the brain of the battery. It's going to go over all what's going on in the battery to make sure the battery is operating at its best performance. So we use a relay-based battery management system, or it's a solid state relay-based BMS. And what you'll see is it has a lot of really cool features that the MOSFET-based BMS does not have, that some of our competitors and different battery providers use. So the first thing is the reliability. So our battery management system is built up to the automotive standard, meaning that although this is just for home energy storage, this automotive standard is the same kind of BMS that would be in like an electric car or in a car. So you know that it's a very robust unit that can handle a lot of different situations. Going down the pros of our new battery management system, it has a very high inrush current, so it can handle high inrushes when turning on an inverter or powering a high amperage load. This is where this is beneficial for that. As I mentioned, it has fast charging and discharging. It has high continuous power input and output. It has high capacity cell balancing, making sure the cells are all balanced and at around the same voltage. It also allows for dynamic control between the units in parallel. So for example, when I touch base on our eVault, this battery management system certainly helps because you can parallel up to 12 of those eVault units. It has versatile protocol communication with external devices, and this is IoT or Internet of Things ready. The only thing where MOSFET certainly has the advantage is the cost. So if you want a really great system with all these features, then the way to go is to consider a battery that has a relay-based BMS. However, there are the MOSFET-based applications out there that are more affordable, but you're not going to get the fast charging and discharging, these high capacity cell balancing, that reliability that a lot of people would really want, especially a battery in their home. So keep that in mind as you take a look at different batteries. Good question to ask is, what kind of battery management system do you have? How does it function? Does it communicate? Does it help the batteries communicate between one another if you have many batteries in parallel? All of these are good questions when taking a look at a battery management system. So here are our two flagship products. We have the eVault 18.5 over here on the left, and we have the newest Eflex 5.4. I'll start with the eVault 18.5. So I mentioned that these are scalable up to 220 kilowatt hours. So that's where in this previous slide, this dynamic control between the units in parallel is very important for, let's say if you had 8 of these eVaults in parallel, that's where that importance comes into play. Also, it has a local monitoring LCD display, which you can view the voltage, current, state of charge, and power of this unit locally. It's a large storage capacity for easy installations. Instead of paralleling a bunch of smaller batteries together, you have one large battery pack. It's also very nice looking, I think, like the gray with the black, and it is on wheels, and it has stands and a place for an L bracket in the back if you need to bracket it to the wall. This is also in California the largest S-chip approved battery, which means you can get more money and more rebate. So 18.5 kilowatt hours, 18.432 DC power, and 17.87 AC power rated for the eVault. So keep that in mind. From California and you want to qualify for the S-chip program, you can definitely get more bang with your buck with this eVault than maybe another solution in that kind of regard. Next, I'll jump on over here to the right for the Eflex 5.4. This is our news. I'm really excited about this Eflex because it does have so many great features that I think can fit a lot of these different applications on the market. So it does have cell-to-pack architecture. It's IP65 rated with an aluminum enclosure. Essentially meaning this is outdoor rated. You can put this outdoors. It's scalable up to 80 kilowatt hours and has very flexible installation methods. So it can be put on the floor, on a wall, or even on a shelf rack. It can be used for renewable, telecom, railway, marine, and RV applications. So renewable for home energy storage system, telecom for keeping the telecommunications projects up and running, marine or RV projects as well. This also will have remote monitoring, has closed loop communication, and is IoT ready. It has an integrated heatsink for 5 times better thermal performance. So I mentioned before, Lithium iron phosphate has a very, very good, safe chemistry, and the temperature range is very broad. This heatsink will only make it more safe and more reassuring to the customer that this is a very safe battery, and you can feel comfortable keeping this in your home. So moving on, here is the side of the Eflex. So I'm sure you guys are wondering, okay, how the heck do I install this thing? So over here on the left, you have your positive and negative terminals. And then this is how you turn on your on-off switch, and then your LED status indicator. So this is gonna show you if the BMS is lighted on, this is the run light, assuming that it's running. And this, from left to right, this is going to be the charge of the battery. So let's say 25 each, 75%, 50%, 25, and then dead. Has a one-way safety valve. So if there's too much pressure inside the battery, this one-way safety valve can alleviate that pressure. And then here you have on the right side your CAN/RS45 inputs and outputs for the communication with many batteries in parallel. If you want to take a look at this Eflex or want any other kind of information, check out our blog, fortresspower.com/blog, as we have a few tips and tricks on installing the Eflex, installation videos, ways you can install it, how to install it. So feel welcome to click on those links real quick and kind of dive into some of those different features. And then I did not mention these. This is our LFP10 and our LFP5. These are great units. They're a little bit more compact, a little bit, more on the battery backup side. They are easy and flexible to install. They have knockouts over here, and this has the same kind of deal, and it has the same lithium iron phosphate chemistry, so it is a very reliable battery. I just know that people like the look of the Eflex versus just the the LFP5. So eventually we will just focus on the Eflex, but for now we do have that solution for anybody interested. So moving on, I'll go over the technical specifications over these 4 models. Now, granted, I'm not going to dive into all one of these individually like I did before, but a few key things. 48 volts, so all of our battery options are a 48 volt nominal battery. If we look here at the stacking of these different batteries, you can put up to 12 of the E-volts together, 15 of those E-flexes for 80, 2 of those 10s, and 3 of those 5s. The E-volt's the only one with LCD display monitoring. And the E-volt and the E-flex are the ones that have the CAN/RS45 capability. As you saw here on the front, there are your 2 ports for the communication, and then the E-volt has a similar on the top of the unit. We have a 10-year warranty on our products with 6,000 cycles at 80% depth of discharge. So one thing that comes up quite often is closed loop communication. We are working with Sol Ark and should have something hopefully soon finished for closed loop communication, but this is certainly a buzzword that we hear a lot when it comes to batteries and inverters. So what is the difference between open and closed loop communication? Open loop control is under the assumption that the BMS is not communicating between the inverter and the battery. And the inverter uses a manual charge settings provided by the battery manufacturer that have to be physically set up. It's known as static. And the lithium ion BMS must provide final protections functions. So the open loop control is essentially that the BMS is not going to communicate with the inverter, and then everything has to be manually programmed into the inverter regarding the battery's parameters. This closed loop control, however, is definitely a lot easier, to say the least. So this will have BMS communication between the inverter and the battery. So for example, our E-volt and the Sol Ark. The inverter regulates charging and discharging according to the BMS, which should be updated live. And this inverter also provides battery protection as dictated by the BMS for a derating or trip off. So let's say there's too much high voltage coming in, there was a low voltage problem. This inverter, because of the closed loop communication, will protect the battery with the BMS to make sure that the cells are safe. So closed loop communication, in essence, very easy. Lets the inverter and the battery talk with one another, and it lets it to update live on what's going on between the inverter and the battery, depending on the situation, if it's emergency power, time of use, X, Y, and Z. Okay. And this is an example of the closed loop control and system setup. So the main thing that we usually see with closed loop communication control is the accuracy. So the BMS controls the charge and discharge curve, and it has a built-in battery chemical electrical characteristic model, and it will have that dynamic interaction between the Eflex and the inverter. So the inverter with this closed loop communication will know that it's using a lithium iron phosphate battery. The BMS is going to control the charging and discharging, so you can stay within the charging and discharging range, and it's going to allow the, let's say, the Eflex and the Sol Ark to communicate. It also will improve the user experience in terms of it being easy to install. It will be more plug and play. There are less parameter settings you have to, spend 10 minutes and put in your figures for, and this will have remote monitoring and remote control. So closed loop communication is definitely a new buzzword when it comes to batteries and inverters, and we're proud that we're working with Sol Ark for this closed loop communication. That being said, Sol Ark is a great partner. We do work with some different other inverters on the market, so we are establishing closed loop communication with Sol Ark truly. We also are working with Schneider and SMA, and have Outback, Magnum, Victron, Morningstar, and Midnight as well. So we're very glad that we have some different options in that regard, whether AC or DC coupling. So I think on my end, I'm good to go. So now I'm going to pass it on over to the Sol Ark team and let them, I know they have some pretty cool slides on their unit as well they'd like to share. So bear with me for 1 second. Let me see if I can make Andy the presenter.
Everybody see my screen?
Yep, Andy, we're good.
Awesome, thank you guys. Really appreciate you having us, Fortress, today as your guest. We really love working with the Fortress team. They have great batteries. They're awesome. They do a whole lot of power, and we'll talk a little bit more about how to set up with Fortress batteries and how to also take advantage of the closed loop communications that are going to be coming out very shortly with Fortress. Okay, so I will talk a little bit about Sol Ark real quick. If you're new to us, there's a whole lot to unpack, so I'm going to keep this very, very light. We do have a YouTube channel, so if you would like more Sol Ark content, you can check out our YouTube channel. So I'm just going to do a very quick overview. This is the Sol Ark inverter. It's an all-in-one box. What we strive to do is bring down the barriers to going solar with storage, and that includes bringing down cost. And by bringing down cost, we mean overall cost, not just cost of the equipment, but reduced install time, reduced potential for error or problems during an install, after an install. So all in all, it's really easy to grab and go a Sol Ark rather than having to puzzle piece multiple different units or items together and have to do mental gymnastics to design a system. As an engineering team at our core, we wanted to make it as easy as possible and do everything for you, whether you're an installer or maybe a real savvy DIYer, so that either the learning curve is low or the learning curve is rather low for new crews, or you're just needing something that you can install much more quickly because you're getting a lot of business. Okay, so real quickly, you can DC couple and AC couple at the same time, up to 16.5 kilowatts if you face your panels southeast and southwest. I would say 13 kilowatts if you're doing all due south peak. It's really a Swiss Army knife in the sense that it can do everything a grid-tied inverter can do and an off-grid inverter can do, all in one box, one SKU, grab and go. So it'll do 120 to 40 single split phase. It'll do 208. 3-phase with just one inverter. It'll do 2 of the 3 phases. If you want true 3-phase, you just put 2 Sol Arks stacked together. It has all of your arc fault and ground fault built in. We have a 4 millisecond no glitch switch, which means that when the power goes out, it will switch immediately to Sol Ark with Fortress battery power within 4 milliseconds. That's so fast, you don't even notice the difference. So the wow factor is, did you see the power switch? No, exactly. Okay. Next, we can do grid tied. If you're thinking about getting Fortress, but the customer is like, I'm just, not sure. Get them going with the Sol Ark and then add the Fortress later. You can just do grid tied and then add batteries later, or if they already have maybe a grid-tied system, they want to add batteries, you can AC couple, super easy, add a Sol Ark, add a Fortress, and get them going. I do have some other brands on here. We do work with other brands, but Fortress, they're an awesome company, just like they work with other inverters. We do work with other batteries, but we wouldn't be doing this together if we really didn't believe in how well we do work together. Okay. In addition to adding batteries, you can add a generator. So what Sol Ark can do is it can not only pull 9 kilowatts from the Fortress battery, but if for whatever reason it's just really bad weather or the customer just needs that extra redundancy, you can add a generator, whether it's a small generator or a large generator. We're very proud of this feature because with really small generators, it's very hard to work with most inverters, and ours are very easy to work with. Another thing is peak power. So with the power that you can pull out of the Fortress, you can use the Sol Ark and leverage the Sol Ark's peak power to start up really heavy motors. So if the grid fails or you're doing an off-grid system and you want to have those creature comforts of central HVAC or big pumps, one Sol Ark can pack a ton of power in a very small space. So you can find that that's really really an awesome feature. Okay, so we're also with a lot of the usual suspects on the financing side. I don't know if Alex mentioned this earlier, but when any of our companies have to get added to these lists, what are called approved vendor lists, it's a really rigorous process. They vet our companies financially very strongly because they're putting their money on the line, their capital, to of course finance our equipment. So suffice it to say, both of our companies are very healthy. We're growing very fast because of our innovation, and you can remotely monitor all of the Sol Ark and Fortress and what's going on in the system. And Dustin will show you a little bit more about this very shortly. Okay, we have tons of stock available, and again, we're looking to bring down not only your cost of goods sold from a hardware standpoint, but really bring down your install cost. If you can get it done in a day, we're seeing that done, which is really awesome. And you're going to get more jobs because more affordability means more potential customers that previously may have been priced out. And now with Sol Ark efficiencies and the innovation that Fortress has brought, you can deliver a whole lot more power for a much lower cost. And I'm going to talk about this in the next few slides. So really quick, because we don't have enough time to unpack all of this, go to our website at sol-ark.com. We openly publish inverter data in the market. So we've taken in all of these inverter brands, we've tested their equipment and published the data based on all of the various attributes that are important to the industry. I'm not going to go into this in too much detail, but suffice it to say, if it's red, we think there are some areas to improve, and if it's green, it's really good. So we're striving for perfection. We know we're not perfect. We do have a little red thing here on our Christmas red and green chart here, no outdoor enclosure, but suffice it to say, we're very proud of being best in class and working with a company like Fortress. So I wanted to show you guys, I'm not going to talk about too many numbers. Now, again, these are MSRP numbers. These are not installer numbers, but I wanted to show you guys a comparison of what really the Sol Ark can do for you when you put it with a Fortress battery. Again, Fortress batteries are LFP, 6,000 cycles. That's a really important number here because over here, if you look at some of the other inverter brands that have a, kind of the, I call it the Apple theme. They do all their, inverter and batteries together. You got to work with their stuff. The batteries are only going to last half the amount of time as a Fortress LFP battery. So what that means is you're going to have to replace all that unit. So with like a Solar Edge here, and I'll show this slide shortly, it's going to be more money, more equipment for a shorter battery life. And you're going to get a lot more battery life with the Fortress, and with the Sol Ark, you're going to get up to 2 times, maybe 3 times the power when it comes to peak power and power coming out of the batteries. Combined with efficiencies, you're really going to benefit, and that's where we focus on innovation and being a really fast-moving company at Sol Ark. All right, so just one 12K inverter. So showing you here, we got the Sol Ark 12K MSRP, ladies and gentlemen. Again, these are not installer numbers, not distribution numbers. These are publicly available prices. I used the number that Alex showed earlier. I kind of quickly modified my slide earlier for the 10 kilowatt hour. So if we look at 6,900 for the battery, 6,900 for the Sol Ark, and then you need rapid shutdown, we strongly recommend going with the Tigo TS4F or maybe AP Systems, or I think Midnight has a solution. But for this example, because Tigo seems to be the most popular, 15,000 and change. So I think this number is wrong, my apologies, but it's about a little over $1 a watt to combine this. So really affordable relative to other competitors, and you're gonna get so like right here, you're $4,000 more, and you don't get nearly the amount of power. You only get half the battery with a Solar Edge. Okay, guys, and then you get a whole lot of power and bang for your buck. All right, look at all this equipment you need with a Solar Edge, and then look what you just need: a Fortress and a Sol Ark, grab and go, and it's going to be a lot less. And I'm not even mentioning generators or other things. So this is all public info, guys, and this is why we're really standing out. Alex did talk about chemistry. I'll touch on that a little bit as well. We do get frequent questions about the Solar Edge LG Chem. They are very transparent about their battery. So let's look at the warranty though. It at about the 5th year, guys, it just drops off a cliff here. So when you have a really strong warranty with Fortress, you can feel really rest assured that not only are you going to get a very good value and you're going to get the optimal chemistry, but they're going to be there for you if something were to happen. You know, Sol Ark, we have a 10-year warranty as well. And I think LFP, you know, it's a great chemistry. So not to get too far into the weeds, but you know, the NMC chemistry, it only lasts about half. And there's a lot of step up and step down where there's a lot of losses. So imagine you have a heating system and you open up your windows in the winter and just all the heat goes out of the home. That's not a great deal. You want to be as tight as possible. So it's the same thing with an inverter and battery. You want to be as tight as possible. And with our number one, you know, efficiencies and round trip and working with the Fortress battery, you're really going to have an optimal solution. So we do frequently get questions about our inverters versus other brands. What we strive to do is make it super easy, all in one box. Again, these are MSRP numbers. This is the 8K. So to get the equivalent apples to apples, you got to have almost 50% more cost in equipment just to get what you can do with the Sol Ark. And then maybe if you're using the Outback, so same thing, you need almost double the amount of equipment. So regardless of the efficiencies and innovations, we're just trying to make it easy so you don't have to do all this thinking, all this mental gymnastics of what's needed, and oh my gosh, my crew or some guy, you know, forgot the something or other. You don't have to worry about that. Just grab the Sol Ark, grab the Fortress battery, and get after it, guys. Okay, so I don't want to take up too much more time. Dustin will show a little bit more about these modes. I have them in some slides, but just remember, guys, we are here for you 7 days a week. 972-575-8875, option 2. Call and experience our engineering team. They're a tremendous group. Dustin is one of our top guys. He's super bright, and he's going to talk soon. We have a leadership team with 30+ years of defense engineering and power electronics. Dive right into our YouTube channel and our website with our manuals, with our sample drawings. You are not alone with Sol Ark here and Fortress. We're more than happy, of course, to answer your questions. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Dustin. So let me see if I can get this real quick. And I know I went really quick, so if at any time there are questions, just put them in the questions box. We're happy to go back over any slides or answer anything soon. So I'm going to make Dustin the presenter.
Okay. Hi. So my name is Dustin. I am one of the technical support engineers here at Sol Ark. We have a really great team, like Andy was mentioning. What I'm showing you right now is actually going to be what you would see in terms of the fleet monitoring that we do offer with the system. So for instance, as you see, you do kind of get an overview of what the system would do in terms of PV production. In this case, we're doing a lot of grid selling. I'm going to show you how we set up the batteries and the different programming we can do remotely, which is an awesome feature that really helps people that have jobs all over their states, and really makes it more convenient for the customer and the installer. So like I said, we'll just hop right into it. So as you see here, the PV production at the top left, you have your grid production or your power being sent to the grid in the top right. Right now we don't have batteries attached to it, but I'm going to show you the programming for that, and then there's no loads going on at the time. This is strictly a grid tied system. So at the top, you'll see different inputs for the inverter itself. If we click on the inverter, battery, kind of straightforward. The alerts, if there's ever a fault, but the main thing I want to dive into is the simplicity of the settings. So here is where you would see the very first item for programming your Sol Ark. In this example, I'm actually going to do where we have open loop instead of closed loop. Once we have that official, we will release the information and we'll make it a little bit more of a streamline because like Alex was saying earlier, there will be communication between the inverter and the Sol Ark. So in this example, I'm just going to select our percentage and I'm going to use the LFP, the 10 kilowatt hour battery that Fortress does use. So as you can see, it does populate some information there, but this is all customizable on what battery you're using. So for instance, if you are using the 200 amp hour value for the LFP 10, and then you'll move down the line to where the max charge, which we have that set to 100, and then the max discharge down to 100 as well. So you'll just follow. We have all of this information for the batteries. Most batteries that we are tied with, we will have that information in the manual, which is pretty awesome whenever you have, different chemistries or different batteries that you're using. And if you ever have any questions or anything like that, you're more than welcome to always give us a call. We can kind of point you in the right direction. So as you enter in the information, you'll have the battery shutdown, activate battery, grid charge if you ever want to charge from the grid. You'll have a generator charge as well if you do have the ability to attach a generator to the system. Your equalization and your absorption and things like that obviously pertain to the batteries as well. Once that's all completed, you enter in that information, you'll actually just hit this confirm button. And what that does is it uses the integrated Wi-Fi port on our system to send that information to the inverter. So no matter if you're in the Bahamas or you're in Puerto Rico or if you're here somewhere here in the States, you'll be able to talk to it as long as it's connected to the internet. The customer, the installer, and us, in order to do updates and things like that, will be able to speak to the inverter in order to make it function how you are wanting it to function. And just to kind of touch base with how it would be with closed communications, we have a different button for that. We don't necessarily use the voltage or percentage. We will actually select the BMS lithium battery tab. And here you'll see where a lot of the information for the float and things like that are still available, but where it comes down to how the battery is used, you'll actually select based off which one we decide for the Modbus communication. You will actually be able to, discern that for the battery you're using. So once that information is released, like I said, we will have that closed communication information to help out with your programming. And just to kind of touch base on the different areas as well, you'll see here in the work mode, we have that system that's directly in grid cell. We do offer two other functions. One is limited power to load, which would be like if you're off grid or for your loads that are going to be on your critical loads panel. Your limited power to home feature though is actually for our system to help backfeed and support your main service panel when the grid is available, but then basically we offset your main service panel without sending power back to the utility. So a lot of the times where people don't have a net metering agreement and certain things like that, restrictions from their utility, we can use that feature to offset their loads without having to dip into the net metering side. One of the cool ones too as well with Fortress we've had a lot of people love is our time of use feature. And this allows, so for instance, if people have the 18.5 kilowatt hour or maybe the 10, and they want to use a little bit of part of their battery during grid operation hours, if they have peak hours or peak demand charges, they can actually dedicate part of the battery to those loads depending on your programming. And so this really helps out. You can schedule it by the time, how much power, and how low you want the batteries to go. So that's a really great feature for people that, like I said, with the demand hours or the peak power that they have, they can discern how much of the batteries they want to use and still have plenty of battery for backup. Just like Andy was saying, we do have 7 days a week technical support as well, even on the weekends. That's something that we really hold high here is our customer service. We want to be available for our people and our customers, just because it's very important that they love the product as much as we do. There's a lot of time and effort that goes into this, and we're always developing new things and trying to make the system that much better and more capable for the customer and the all-time use. So most of the other stuff too is, I think they touched on it really well. But if you ever have questions, like Andy said, just give the 972-575-8875 number a call, hit extension 2, and that'll get you to myself and the team here at Sol Ark, and we're more than happy to help, and we'll point you in the right direction, and we'll get you taken care of. So I believe I'll pass it back to Alex. I think that was of the next game. So let me do this.
Alrighty, Dustin, thank you again. And now we'll do the quick Q&A. Jamie will be moderating. And in the meantime, if you see our respective contact informations here, thank you guys, everybody, for joining us again. Before we get started, I have Andy's contact over here on the left, and then you see yours truly over here on the right. So we'll get started on this Q&A. Jamie?
Okay, great. We will answer as much of these as we can, and if we don't, we'll be able to get back to you after the webinar. So the first question is from Dean. Does the 6,000 cycle lifespan of Fortress batteries include 100% DOD?
Dean, so the 6,000 cycles is at an 80% depth of discharge. You can go to 100% depth of discharge, but you only get 2,000 cycles or around 2,000 cycles with that far down of depth of discharge.
Okay, Ravi is asking, please explain what you mean by 5 times the thermal heat sink for Eflex 5.4.
Yeah, so the heat sink the Eflex has the integrated heat sink for up to 5 times better thermal management. So this heat sink, if I'm not mistaken, Eric, you might want to jump in here, will help essentially keep the battery temperature within its battery range so that there is less chance for thermal runaway or things like that.
Yeah, this is Eric. I'm the lead engineer at Fortress Power. The heat and is usually impact the battery the most in the most of the case, especially the life expectancy. So the whole thing we engineer, I mean, everybody in this world, if they do professional design, they try to want the heat out of the batteries, and then they want to make it even in the system. So we have the heat sink built into the whole enclosure. So that's increased significantly the thermal performance of the batteries.
Great. Okay. Next question is from Chris. What is the lowest temperature in Fahrenheit of the eVolt will operate in?
So our operating range is from 32 degrees Fahrenheit to 113 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah, you cannot charge the battery under 32, so that will have a permanent damage to the battery cell. But you can still do slow discharge roundabout at 32, but at a low C rate. For example, in the eVolt, you can do 20 amps.
Okay.
If you install in outdoor situation has a harsh weather, there's a plenty solution. You can integrate a enclosure heater in it to keep the temperature warm above 32. So the ideal temperature will be like 65 to 75. That's the range.
Okay, great. Timothy is asking, for both Fortress Power and Sol Ark, do your websites provide local installer lists?
Fortress, yes, and I think Sol Ark, you guys have something too on your website, right?
Yes, we do. So on our website, there's a where to buy button, and then you just click that, and you'll find orange and blue pins. Blue pins are if you're an installer. Those are distribution partners, and orange pins are for installers. So if you're an installer and you like working with Sol Ark and you haven't maybe reached out to us directly before and you'd like to be pinned, just fill out the sign up form at the top of the page on our main website, and then we'll get you pinned on there. Okay, thanks guys.
Perfect. Okay, another one from Timothy. So he's asking, in the earlier image of 2 Fortress 18.5 units also showed 2 Sol Ark units. I thought one Sol Ark would control both.
That is correct. One Sol Ark can control both units. However, in most cases where you're using more than 18.5 or 2 of those Fortress E-Volts, there is a lot of case where people use 2 Sol Arks in order to increase their AC output.
Okay, great. Can Sol Ark work with optimizers on PV array?
They do. That's not a problem. If you are experiencing, any shading or, different facing arrays and things like that, just similar to the Tigo rapid shutdown, we've had people in the past use the Tigo optimizers for their systems.
Okay. Rob is asking, will 2 Sol Arks back up a 208 volt 3-phase loads or only single phase loads on each of the 3 legs?
If you are doing a 208 3-phase system, 2 Sol Arks can do true 3-phase off-grid as well. The way we have it wired in our manual can help you and guide you on how that is done, but the system in parallel can provide both.
Great. Okay. Frank is asking, for DC couple, what do you suggest for rapid shutdown?
So I think that it depends on where you're at and what your local rules are in the NEC code for your state. I believe Andy mentioned it earlier on, but if you are needing 2017 and newer, we do recommend the Tigo TS4-A-F if all you're needing is rapid shutdown. If you are needing string compliance, then a lot of the times we've had people use the Midnight Solar. And those, we do have a list of compatible parts in our newest version of the manual that's also on our website.
Okay. Santiago is asking, is 9.6 the max amount connectable, or is it possible to connect a larger system, but it would limit the input?
Unfortunately, it is a 9.6 hard cap. We do have to have limitations in terms of the AC coupling. If you do have a larger AC coupling array, you can always break apart part of that AC couple, if it's microinverters or things like that, to stay underneath the 9.6. Or if you do a parallel system as well, you can have an increased amount of AC coupling.
And that's just usually because of the NEC rules, if that's correct, Dustin, right? Because of the 40 amp?
That is correct, yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, we have a question from Fernando. Which is the minimum size of the Fortress battery for a Sol Ark system to not void the battery warranty?
Well, in terms of the Sol Ark, there's not really a minimum. We can work with just about any of them as long as the nominal voltage is 48 volts. But there's not really a size. It just based off your loads is how we would kind of point you in the right direction, and it allows for scalability.
Yeah, from battery side, usually we recommend under warranty. So you want to choose 2 times rated power on the inverter side, which make it the E-Volt is perfect match with the Sol Ark system. So that's exactly almost 2 times, a little bit more. So that will keep the longest running time for lithium batteries.
Okay. How many amps or load can be backed up with a Sol Ark in a backup mode?
So the off-grid capabilities of the Sol Ark is 8,000 watts or 33 amps continuous at 240 volts.
Okay, I have one here from DC Long. Can 12K do a whole house on an AC output with an ATS? like Tesla Generac, or does grid power have to route through the Sol Ark as a traditional hybrid inverter?
So in most cases, a single unit, we don't really recommend to have it as a whole house backup. Nevertheless, we have had people do it in the past. The reasoning why is in most cases, it's kind of, you're putting a lot of pressure on the customer themselves to make sure that it's underneath the rated output for off-grid use. But again, like I said, it's not required to have the grid in there. You can just have it act as a UPS, which is another great feature that the Sol Ark has.
And I'll add to that. So if a customer is looking for a whole home backup, you're going to need to have a couple things. One, peak power. You need large surge amount to power heavy loads. So the Sol Ark is going to deliver 20 kilowatts surge peak, and the Generac is only going to deliver maybe, I think it's 10 kilowatts, and the Tesla only does 5 to 7 kilowatts. So you need 2, if not 3 power walls to do what one Sol Ark can do. And then you need more than 2 of the Generac systems, and I don't think you can stack more than 2 of the Generac systems. And then because of the Panasonic batteries, their NMC chemistry, you're going to have more step up, step down losses than with the Fortress battery. So all in all, you're going to get twice the battery life with the Fortress. You're going to get a longer warranty. You're going to get an easier install, and you're going to get to power some really, really heavy stuff with the Sol Ark.
Okay. Mario is asking, is the Sol Ark 8 getting discontinued?
It is not in our plans at the moment, so that might be hearsay, but right now we are good to go with plenty of 8K and plenty of 12K.
Okay. Samuel is asking, besides solar, what other sources can charge directly to the battery?
So you can do like AC coupling, obviously, but there is a generator input into the Sol Ark capable at this moment. I can say that we are working on different compatible ways of adding power to the system. I wish I could share a little bit more details, but it is still in the early days, in the early process of testing. But just be on the lookout. Just keep an eye out on our pages and our YouTube channel. We're always releasing great content for what we're doing around the systems.
Okay. Jesse's asking, any plans to seek UL 9540 certification for this Sol Ark with Fortress batteries? If so, what is the process?
That's the topic we're under discussion with the Sol Ark. So that's on the plan. So I can't give an exact date yet at this moment. As said, so if we do it, we're going to make a joint announcement on that.
Okay. Another question from DC Long. Any communication with Smart Panel for load management based on SOC such as SPAN?
So there have been a few customers in the past that have used different smart panels. We only have a handful because of the price of the smart panels, but the most common one that we have seen is probably the Lumen or a few others, but nevertheless, it should be fine. The biggest thing we run into with the smart panels, however, is the transfer time of the smart panel in comparison to us. Since we have a 4 millisecond transfer time, sometimes the relays and things like that in those smart panels aren't able to keep up, and therefore there's still a little bit of a delay for whenever the grid goes down.
Okay. Question from Jason. Does Fortress as well as Sol Ark publish the RS485 API networking spec to decode the message available for the third-party data acquisition platforms?
Jimmy, can you repeat the question, please?
Can you repeat the question again?
Sure. Does Fortress as well as Sol Ark publish the RS485 API networking spec to decode the messages available for other third-party data acquisition platforms?
I think that's case by case.
So in terms of our system, however, we do produce a lot of information in our manual that talks about the different pins and things like that for the Modbus and the CAN bus. But at this time, a lot of that information is held close to the chest, and that's just because there are certain things that can go into the system in terms of Modbus that could cause a little bit of problems within the system. So we try to make sure that who has that information is, we can verify that it will be used for, API or things like that.
Right.
Okay. David is asking.
I'm sorry to interrupt. We're more than happy to take that conversation offline. If you call, Fortress and we'll talk about that with them, or call us. We're working on several things. We sometimes don't bring them up for the reasons that Dustin mentioned. But if that is something that is of interest, then do not feel shy. Just reach out and we can take that conversation a little bit further. Thank you.
Correct. Let us know. We want to know the purpose of what you want to do with the data and so on. So we'll work with you.
Perfect. Okay, so Dave is asking, if I already have a solar array, does it make sense to remove my existing inverters and switch to the Sol Ark for the PV array, or just use AC coupling?
So that is a common question that we get with, especially with systems that have already been installed and they're looking to add battery backup. It really does come down to how you want the system to function. Since we can use the AC coupling off grid as well as on grid, it comes down to really what is more beneficial to you. If you're looking for something more streamlined, then obviously DC coupling is always the best way to go, because we can control everywhere that power is sent to the batteries, to the loads, and things like that. Whereas AC coupling, there's just a little bit more fine tuning that we have to do in the system to make sure that it flows in the direction that we want it to.
Okay. Phil is asking, can my off-grid home customer use a Sol Ark 12K with a 10 kilowatt hour Fortress LifePo battery as the prime power system? And is there a recommended backup generator kilowatt size which would be optimized for the solar converter?
I'll take this question. The short answer is yes. The longer answer is, what are we looking to power? So if we understand what the customer needs to power, then we can calculate the amount of storage if 10 kilowatt hours is sufficient. If it's double than that, maybe we need to go with the eVault instead of the Eflex or the LFP10. We just need to look at that. Same thing with the Sol Ark. If we can use one Sol Ark, generally we can, but if they insist on maybe, let's say, random appliance, a hot tub, they really want to have their hot tub, well, that's going to use a lot more power. So we may need to have two Sol Arks. So evaluating what they have, but let's just, for example's sake, make it really easy and talk about the basics for off-grid. If you have ductless mini split air conditioning, a hybrid water heater, an induction cooktop, or maybe a pellet stove, you will be able to use one Sol Ark 12K, and pretty much I think the LFP10 would be enough, but maybe you'll need an eVault. And the reason I just have that range of 10 to 20 is because we don't know the climate in the region you're located, so we would need to fine tune a little bit more about how much sun you would have, because using the smart load, you're going to be able to use the PV to power the mini splits and the hot water before needing to go to batteries. But if you're in a very cloudy area or it rains all the time, maybe we need a little bit more battery storage. So the short answer is we're doing a lot of off-grid homes, completely off-grid, say 7 kilowatts of PV with one Fortress battery and one Sol Ark, and the level of comfort, I would put it at 97% the same as being in an urban area.
Great.
Just one quick comment. So it's just a typical calculation when you do the assessment for the off-grid system. You need to look at the peak power and then the continuous power consumption from customer to decide how many inverter and how many battery you need for the whole system.
Okay.
You can contact us and then help you to size out. We have our sizing tool. Yes. We can help you to size out the system you want.
Agreed on that comment. Yes.
Yeah. Right. That is all the time we have today. Thank you everyone for joining us for this webinar. If we did not get a chance to answer your question, please send us an email through the 2 emails that are listed right here. And again, you will get a copy of this presentation later on today. So thank you again, and thank you to our presenters and our panelists, and we'll see you at our next webinar.
Thank you, everybody. Of
Thank you for having us, Fortress.
course. Take care.